Welcome. Today is the 10th day of Cheshvan, the 11th of November. And we're continuing our treatment of this verse from this week's Parsha, from the third reading, I believe. And the verse that we saw was that God had pity over Lot, and that's why he took him out of Sodom. And we said that this word pity is very special because it only appears 3 times in the Pentateuch. We discussed that last time. We said it's related, and a lot of times it's translated as mercy or compassion, but it's not the same thing, and we explained yesterday why. What we want to see today is, how do we turn this into a model? What do we do with this? So, there's a very basic thing that we've gone over in the past, but we're going to have to do a little bit of the legwork again. And that is that most of the roots in the modern Hebrew grammar have 3 letters. I want to stress that this is not the only grammar that we have. We have a much earlier grammar that was in use in the time of the sages, in the time of the Mishnah, the time of the Temple. And even though the study of grammar was not very advanced yet, or at least not documented to be advanced, I don't know how advanced they actually were, but they had a 2-letter root system that they used, and it still works. Again, you have to remember that Hebrew is a language that on the one hand, the spoken Hebrew is based on Akkadian, or at least that's what it looks like from history, and the written Hebrew that came down in the Torah was given by God. So when you look at a God-given text and you try to understand the grammar, you can come up with something different. So Akkadian was definitely based on 3-letter roots. But again, this idea of 2-letter roots is what the early sages used in the time of the temple, even in the time of the first temple. In any case, we're going to be looking at the 3-letter roots. And the 3-letter roots, we've mentioned in the past that this is grounded in Ezekiel's vision of the chariot. How exactly this is, I'll just say like a couple of sentences. This is the predominant, I think, interpretation by the Kabbalists, that he sees 3 levels of angels that he calls the wheels, Ofanim, and above that he sees the living beings, the Chayot, and above that he sees the Seraphim, which literally mean the burning angels. And these 3 levels, they correspond to the 3 letters in each root in the Hebrew language. So the reason we connect this with the chariot is because the word chariot in Hebrew, or the word that it is translated as chariot, Merkava, also means to integrate, to connect, le'arkiv, to put together. And so the Merkava, the chariot, is not just about a chariot, even though it's clear that that's part of the image there. But the chariot is a putting together of 3 things that then carry the image of man on top of it. That's the 4th level there. And that's the same idea as saying that language carries us. In other words, that we couldn't develop as human beings, we couldn't develop civilization, we couldn't develop our connection with God, and so on, without language. Language is necessary for that. Okay, so getting back to this 3-letter root. The 3-letter word of this word, pity, we translate it as pity, chamal, are chet, mem, and lamed. Now, again, we said we have to say a few introductory words to understand this. The basic word that the Kabbalists use is God's essential name, the Tetragrammaton. It has 3 root letters, Yud, and Hey, and Vav. Because the last Hey is just a repetition of the first, it's not part of the root. And what this means is being, literally. So whenever we say Havaya, like in modern Hebrew, we're taking it from this three-letter root Yud Vav Hey. Yud Hey Vav. Okay. Now we know that the first three letters of God's name correspond to wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So that's what you have in the diagram behind you if you're watching the Zoom. So you see that in wisdom, now we're building this as a partzuf. We're building this as a model. So in wisdom we have a Yud, in understanding we have a Hey, and in knowledge we have a Vav. So that is the correspondence for the first three letters. Now we need to talk about permutations. How many roots can you build out of three letters? The answer is 6. You take three letters and you can combine them in 6 different ways. That's combinatorics in mathematics. How does it work? Well, underneath the wisdom, we'll put the 2 roots that begin with the Yud, because wisdom is Yud. Underneath the understanding, we'll put the 2 roots that begin with a Hey. And underneath Vav, underneath knowledge, we'll put the 2 roots that begin with a Vav. And so if you look at the chart, you'll see that there's Yud Kei Vav and Yud Vav Hey. That's how you need to think about these. They work by axes. Like if somebody would ask, how do you know how to order these? It's very simple. The ones that have a Yud at the beginning belong on the right axis. The ones that have a Hey in the beginning belong in the left axis, and the ones that have a Vav in the beginning belong in the middle axis. The only question now becomes in which order you put them. This already becomes a point of contention. We find different orderings of how to organize the 2 roots under each axis that are lying on each axis. There's no dispute about the ones lying on the right axis under wisdom. Everybody agrees it's Yud Kei Vav. You start with Yud Kei Vav the way it is in the original root, and you then put the other root that begins with a Yud. So that will be Yud Vav Hey. The question becomes with the left axis, and sometimes even with the middle axis. With the left axis, we will find that in some places, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, switches the 2 roots. We have them in the order that the Zohar usually brings them, and even the Arizal usually brings them, and the Baal Shem Tov, copying from the Arizal, brings them. Hey Vav Yud and Hey Yud Vav. And then there's in one place in the Zohar that he also switches the middle axis, the roots in the middle axis. So instead of Vav Yud Hey being in beauty and Tiferet, and Vav Hey Yud being in Yesod and foundation, so we find them reversed. But here we brought the simplest explanation. This is the one that's most ubiquitous, and it's the one that's most commonly used. Okay? So now, what do we do with this root, Chamal, Chet Mem Lamed? Well, we have to know which of the letters is 3 letters, Chet Mem Lamed. Which one is the wisdom? Which one is the knowledge? Which one is the understanding? So in Chet Mem Lamed, it's actually not very difficult because the Mem is usually wisdom. The Lamed is always understanding. If you learn anything about the Hebrew letters, one of the first things you come across is that Lamed, the biggest of the letters, is related to understanding. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I don't want to get into it. It's always related to understanding. And then that leaves us with the Chet, which here is Da'at, is knowledge. Okay. So now that we know this, we can order the 3 letters. So under Chokhmah, we're now going to build the equivalent Partzuf. Actually, we're going to build it together. It's going to take us a moment. So we'll just copy these. And let's go down here. And let's build it together. So we said here we're going to have the Mem. That's not a Mem. That actually happens to be a... Here, we said we'll have the lamed, and here we will have the chet. So if we follow this, it's quite simple that the order of this one would be mem, lamed, chet, melach, that means salt. Here we'd have mem, chet, lamed, machal, to forgive. Here we're going to start with the lamed, and then we're going to take the last letter, chet, and mem, lechem. It's very nice that melach and lechem go together, salt and bread. Here we'll have the opposite, lamed mem chet, which is not yet, in our world, is not yet a root. It doesn't stand for anything. Here we will have, again, following this order, chet mem lamed, and here we will have the other option of the starting with the chet, chet lamed mem, chalam, to dream. So this is the order of our partzuf. And the amazing thing is, and this exactly fits what we've been discussing, is that this root, chamal, which is the root of the word we've been talking about in our verse, that in God's pity over Lot, he took him out of Sodom. The word was chimlat Hashem, the pity of Hashem, of God's pity. Chimla, the root, is chet mem lamed. And it appears exactly in the place of the Tiferet, the place of beauty, whose inner experience is compassion. So we see here beautifully that this fits. It's one of these examples that show you very beautifully that everything is really structured. That, again, we said you could translate, and most of the translation actually will say compassion, but the word is chimla, it's pity, it's different, but it still carries a very similar meaning. And here, when we organize the roots according to the Sfirot, we find that chet mem lamed, the root of pity, is exactly in the place of the Tiferet of the compassion. So this was a beautiful example, I believe, of how you use roots in Hebrew in order to analyze the language and to understand where things are coming from. Thanks very much for joining. I realize if you're watching this on YouTube, it's probably going to be very difficult to understand because you didn't see the file that we have in the background that's showing everything as we're doing it. I guess the only way to work this out is that in the description, I'll try to bring the partzuf in some way that can be understood. And hopefully that'll help those who are watching on YouTube. If not, you can always join our Zoom classes. I may use this more and more because I like this OBS setup. And I invite you to join. The way to join is to download Wonders from our Patreon site, patreon.com/galeinai, G-A-L-E-I-N-A-I. Again, that's G-A-L-E-I-N-A-I. And download any issue, the PDF version. And on the second page, you'll find a QR code with which you can join these classes. So thanks very much for joining today. Hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.